Hail to the chief.
He's a man of change.
As the new president heads to Washington.
He wants wins.
We're on the scene. Hear what Trump's America could mean for you.
They need some kind of action right away.
On today's 700 Club.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this special Inauguration Day edition of the 700 Club. Well, after one of the longest, most expensive, and strangest elections in American history, Donald Trump becomes the 45th president of the United States today, and he clearly intends to get off to a very fast start, with new executive orders to come possibly as soon as today. David Brody brings us this look at Trump's plans for his first 100 days.
You could potentially accomplish a lot in 100 days. You could lose weight, you could walk from New York to Los Angeles at a brisk pace, or even write the U.S. Constitution. All big victories. But that's what President Trump hopes for in his first 100 days.
I think the first couple months for Donald Trump is going to be very intense because he wants wins. He really wants points on the board.
At Real Clear Politics, A.B. Stoddard knows what presidents face in this town. She says Trump is about to get a dose of congressional reality.
He's going to find that it's not a boardroom and that you have to do some care and feeding of members of Congress, or in the end you lose.
While the to-do list is fairly long, the priority of tax reform will be a complex task.
It's very, very tricky to try to take away any of the carve-outs in the tax code. There's a constituency and a lobby for everyone, and it's been tried before.
Trump has already talked infrastructure improvement, and Democrats seem willing to work with him on it. Then, of course, there's repealing and replacing Obamacare.
The conservatives that have been waiting for this since 2010 will demand this. This is year 7, and they need some kind of action right away.
Evangelicals want results, too. From the defunding of Planned Parenthood to Trump fulfilling his promise to repeal the Johnson Amendment, which muzzles pastors in the pulpit.
Free speech is being taken away from people that are great people, from people that are saying good things, not bad things.
But Trump's biggest move could happen within just weeks of taking the oath.
High profile, the Supreme Court pick. Crucial to everything, sets the tone at the beginning, I would think. He's got to come out strong there.
That pick, which is coming in 2 weeks after he's inaugurated, is going to be such an important beginning. Many voters voted for Donald Trump with a stomachache because they want a Supreme Court with 3 more conservative justices on it, or at least 1 or 2, possibly 3. And that, to many voters, was the sole reason for voting for Donald Trump.
As the country waits for that name, Trump will be busy with pen in hand. The plan? Reverse many of Obama executive actions, and end burdensome federal and environmental regulations. The new president won't need Congress to approve the Keystone Pipeline or leave the Trans-Pacific Partnership trade deal that Obama put in place, but lawmakers never approved. Trump can also stop climate change payments to the United Nations. It's a lot to keep up with, so sign up for Twitter, because that's where you're going to find the new bully pulpit of the presidency, as the new commander-in-chief Trump breaks new ground by going directly to the people as tweeter-in-chief.
Well, David Brody is with us now from our Washington bureau. David, it's good to have you with us today. Is it Trump's basic belief? Does he feel like he was elected to make change and so absolutely intends for that to be the focus?
There's no question about that, Terry. I think that has been the case. And quite frankly, it really hadn't been the case at the beginning of this campaign. But as the campaign went along, he realized he had a basket full of deplorables that were with him all around the country. And Terry, this was the Democrats' biggest fear. I remember talking to a Democrat strategist about 9 months ago. This was roughly about 6 months into the campaign. And they said, look, if Donald Trump actually becomes the GOP nominee against Hillary Clinton, our biggest fear is that Rust Belt, that means Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, those states, those Rust Belt, older white Americans who are Reagan Democrats will come out in support of Trump because he's speaking their language. And boy, for a brash billionaire to talk like a cab driver and relate to folks like that, it's quite a political skill. He has been able to do that. And I think we're authentically going to see that here in mere hours.
Well, David, this is Pat. And, hey, man, what a day, 45. David, I don't know about you, but I think that Trump is going to be a transformational figure. I think he's going to go down in history as one of the great presidents of all time. Do you share my view or not? Is that too over the top?
Well, I can confirm that he shares your view, Pat. I don't think there's any question about it. Look, I think the bottom line with Donald Trump is he doesn't have time for all the silly nonsense that goes on in Washington. And I think what you're going to see, as a matter of fact, the parade, which normally is like 3 hours, this inaugural parade, he says, like, enough with the 3-hour parade. I want an hour and a half because I got to get to work. He's going to go visit the CIA on Saturday, or the FBI, excuse me, on Saturday. It's not a weekend for Donald Trump. So this guy has no problem here getting down to make sure what's done in Washington gets done. And I think that's the key. As a matter of fact, I can see him now, Pat, where he literally looks around at all the pomp and circumstance and says, well, this is very nice, very elegant, but really, let's just get to work.
David, I understand that he's forecasting cuts of $10 trillion. I mean, this is major, but it's overdue.
Yeah, we're looking at the Commerce Department, the Energy Department, and in essence, he's going to get rid of a lot of that waste that we've heard for years about. But let's face it, the establishment, Republican and Democrat, have had no desire to get rid of those pork projects or some of what that excess waste is all around Washington. So yes, he's going to do that. It could be $10 trillion over 10 years. The National Endowment for Arts, we know about that liberal gobbledygook, if you will. That should be gone. He's looking at privatizing PBS, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. So there are going to be a lot of changes coming, and they'll happen quickly, Pat, especially as it relates to executive orders.
Well, that's the slush fund for liberals. I mean, that National Endowment for the Arts, that Mapplethorpe, I remember standing up against the horrible things that man did. It was disgusting, obscene, and nasty. And yet we've had to pay for it. You remember the leaping lesbian follies? And I said, if the lesbians want to leap in folly, they can do it on their own money, not on mine. Okay, David, it looks like Trump has more evangelicals in his administration than any president. How much influence do you think they're going to have?
Huge. Pat, this is huge. Let's go down the list. In the West Wing, you've got, obviously, Mike Pence, Kellyanne Conway, born-again evangelical, Reince Priebus, an evangelical, faith very important to him. So you've got the White House Chief of Staff, a senior advisor, and the Vice President, all as true blue, if you will, believers. And then you go to the cabinet and you have Ben Carson, you have Betsy DeVos, and you have others as well, Mike Pompeo. And so you put all of this in totality and you say, my goodness gracious, what a list of characters, if you will, evangelical characters. And let's not forget Sean Spicer, a pro-life, I was about to call him a pro-life Democrat. What am I talking about? A pro-life Catholic who wears his faith actually a bit on his sleeve, too. We had a chance to speak with Sean Spicer, Pat, Jennifer and I, up in Trump Tower last week at an off-the-record meeting, and there are changes to come. This administration, we're in tight with this administration as it relates to being on the ground and understanding the pulse of what's going to happen. So keep it here. We're going to have quite a bit to share.
One last fight they've got is tax reform. Everybody knows the code needs fixing. The lobbyists are going to be going for their piece of the pie. What do you think? Is going to be a huge fight over it?
There's going to be a big fight over tax reform, but there is an expectation up here in Washington that will get done. So the question then becomes, Pat, what happens in the first 100 days? Do not expect any sort of tax reform package to actually get signed into law by President Trump. I can't believe I just said those words. I said those words, Pat. Whoever thought I would say those words? President Trump in the first 100 days. Instead, I think what you'll see at the end of 100 days is a framework for tax reform. It is complicated. You're right. The lobbyists will be up in arms left and right, literally left and right. And so when you put it all together, the framework will be there at the end of 100 days, but then maybe expect something in April, maybe May, actually, as it relates to tax reform being on the president's desk.
David, it's a new day. There's happiness in Washington. Is there? Well, anyhow, we'll talk more about it. Thank you for covering. Appreciate it.
You bet. Thanks, Pat.
Well, there are many influential people in Washington as the Trump administration comes into office. The question is, who will be the most powerful? Our Jenna Browder brings us this look at 3 key Washington insiders.
3 wheelers and dealers at the center of the Trump administration. Vice President-elect Mike Pence, Speaker of the House Paul Ryan, and soon-to-be Chief of Staff Reince Priebus.
What's your overall impression of each one of these men?
Well, I think that they're really in a different league.
Former House Speaker Newt Gingrich, who knows a thing or two about Washington, sees Pence as perhaps the most important.
He's like the moon to Trump's sun.
Gingrich thinks Pence can carry the load on Capitol Hill by using his experience and close ties to lawmakers.
Pence will be really important at saying, you know, this isn't quite gone over up on the Hill, or the Hill's raised these new questions, or Senator Jones came by to see me and he has this problem we need to solve. So he becomes a gatherer of information that's very important on the outside.
His friendly relationship with Ryan will also prove critical and help smooth out any bumps between the Speaker and new president.
Paul Ryan did not want Donald Trump in the primaries. He made that perfectly clear. And once Trump was the nominee and remained a really controversial figure, doing things that Republicans could not defend.
A.B. Stoddard with Real Clear Politics says Ryan is in an especially tough position.
It's a big burden on the Speaker of the House to try to shepherd through, first of all, keep his ranks together, hold a united front against Democrats, and then keep some cohesion with the president and the executive branch to pass an agenda through in a very polarized time without eruptions on Twitter from Donald Trump.
At the other end of Pennsylvania Avenue will be Trump's right-hand man and White House Chief of Staff, who's known both Pence and Ryan for decades.
And having an effective day-to-day operation, Reince Priebus has clearly got the primary burden. That's what he's going to focus on, is making the train run on time.
In your opinion, what's the key to making this situation work?
I think the key is open communication, having coffee together regularly. It's not always the business meeting where you look each other in the eye and you're negotiating. Sometimes it's sitting around chatting, and letting things bubble up.
And on the flip side, what do you think it would take to tear it all apart?
One of them to try to decide that they were clever and that they were going to somehow operate in a deceitful way or operate by being sneaky. I think that person wouldn't last very long.
All three here for a reason: to get results. In other words, to turn bills into laws. A unique combination, bringing a president who won as an outsider together with insider know-how to turn his vision of Make America Great Again into reality. In Washington, Jenna Browder, CBN News.
Thanks, Jenna. Well, our correspondent Abigail Robertson joins us now from the rooftop of 101 Constitution Avenue with a spectacular view of the west front of the Capitol, where President-elect Donald Trump will soon be sworn in. Abby, tell us about what's going on in Washington.
Oh man, it is an exciting time in Washington. The first family arrived yesterday afternoon and they started the day at Arlington Cemetery laying wreaths, and then went to the welcome ceremony at Lincoln Memorial, which I had the pleasure of attending. It was a beautifully done event with lots of performers like Three Doors Down and country music star Toby Keith. It ended with great spectacular firework display, and then they had a gala last night at Union Station, and now there are already thousands of people here ready for the swearing in.
Well, how tight has the security been? I know that there's been some talk of a demonstration, but how much security is in place?
I have never seen so much security in Washington before, but I also have never seen so many protesters. They have been in front of my apartment every night this week. I even had the pleasure of hearing their encore performance at 2 a.m. last night. But the security team is just doing a fabulous job. I feel very, very safe. They are everywhere, all over the city, and they really have things under control.
Well, Trump faced opposition from congressional Republicans during the primaries. You've talked with some key senators, McCain, Rand Paul, Lindsey Graham. What did they tell you?
Well, so Senator Graham and McCain will probably be two of Trump's kind of biggest GOP critics. And both of them said that, they're kind of on board with a lot of what Trump wants to do. Senator Graham told me he's all for Trump's tax reform, boosting the military, and electing pro-life leaders to the Supreme Court. But they really disagree with his stance on Russia right now and want him to kind of toughen up against Russia and increase sanctions for meddling in the November elections.
Well, Trump is saying things like, I love Paul Ryan. How closely is the team working with the Republicans in Congress?
He's working very closely with Republican leaders. I think they all realize that they need to take advantage of this three-branch control to really get their priorities passed into law. So they're all trying to get on the same page to get some bills together that they can all agree with.
One last question. There's talk about cutting funding for the UN because of what the UN did in relation to Israel. Is that going to go anywhere, do you think?
I think so. When I spoke to Senator Graham, he is in charge of foreign operations funding, and he said that for the past year, he has warned the UN that if they tried to pass a resolution against Israel before Obama and Kerry took office, that Obama and Kerry would not veto, that he would take action. And currently, the U.S. funds 21% of the UN's annual budget. So he thinks that this bill that he's proposed alongside Senator Ted Cruz is really going to get their attention and make them rethink this resolution.
Well, Abigail, thank you. I know it's an exciting day for you, so stay warm and stay safe, and we'll talk to you later, okay?
All right, I will.
Terry, what do you got?
Well, still ahead, a look at the new president's possible picks for the Supreme Court and the Democrats' opposition.
At the end of the day, if they try to filibuster, that Republicans will use the nuclear option.
Jay Sekulow joins us as we continue our special Inauguration Day coverage. That's coming up. He's set to become the top law enforcement officer in the United States, despite opposition from some Democrats. Wendy Griffith brings us this look at Donald Trump's nominee for Attorney General, Alabama Senator Jeff Sessions.
Jefferson Beauregard Sessions was born in Selma, Alabama in 1946. Despite humble beginnings, Sessions did well in school, served as U.S. Attorney for Alabama's Southern District, the state's Attorney General, and was elected to the U.S. Senate in 1996, where he's served ever since.
Friends say Sessions' country upbringing instilled values in him like honesty, hard work, belief in God, and parental respect, values that still define him today.
First of all, he's a consummate gentleman. You'll never find Jeff Sessions say or do anything that's in the slightest bit offensive. He's very courteous.
Longtime friend, Republican Congressman Bradley Byrne, says Alabamans are thrilled that Trump has pegged Sessions for the nation's top lawyer.
They love it. Are you kidding me? The people of Alabama voted very strongly for Mr. Trump. Maybe Mr. Sessions, Senator Sessions, had something to do with that.
Despite his popularity, Sessions' confirmation hearings were plagued by protesters calling him a racist, a charge that's haunted him since 1986, when he was refused a federal judgeship over alleged racist remarks. Remarks he denied then and now.
I am the same person, perhaps wiser and maybe a little better, I hope so, today than I was then. But I did not harbor the kind of animosities and race-based discrimination ideas that I was accused of. I did not.
Despite these allegations, many Black Americans support Sessions.
Do you think Senator Jeff Sessions is a racist?
When I consider Senator Jeff Sessions, I choose to regard his actions, such as desegregating the educational system when he had that under his purview, and also prosecuting the Ku Klux Klan. So if he did prosecute the Ku Klux Klan, to answer you, I would not call Mr. Sessions racist.
A number of Black pastors also came to Sessions' defense.
Americans are living in a toxic climate where the serious charge of racism is carelessly leveled against anyone with whom the left disagrees.
Do you think he's going to sail through confirmation hearings, or you think it's going to be a fight?
He will not sail through, but let's believe that he will make it through.
Wendy Griffith, CBN News.
Well, people who know him seem to think he's a man of strong character.
Oh, he's an outstanding person, and he'll go through. You know, let's face it, this is the legal officer of the president, and he has absolute right to pick who he wants.
Of course.
And so for, you know, some of these left-wing congressmen on the Democratic side, the huff and puff, they're not going to block him. No way. And furthermore, the nuclear option is in place. And hopefully, I mean, I don't think there's any question that Lindsey Graham and the other dissidents are going to stand together, and the Republicans will vote as a bloc, and I think the Democrats are going to vote for him, too. Well, today is all about Donald Trump taking over the White House. And for many people, the most important issue of his presidency will be his picks for lifetime appointments to the Supreme Court. Donald Trump will soon have to make that choice for a new justice on the High Court to replace one of the historically great justices, Antonin Scalia. Paul Strand brings us this.
Many people voted for Trump just because of their worry of what damage a more liberal Supreme Court could do in years ahead. Kurt Levy of the Committee for Justice and FreedomWorks.
People were particularly sick of liberal judicial activism.
Groups advising the incoming Trump administration on a Supreme Court nominee are offering their opinions about those now on the president-elect's short list. John Malcolm of the Heritage Foundation says federal Judge William Pryor is a favorite among pro-lifers for blasting the High Court on its 1973 ruling legalizing abortion nationwide.
Before he became a judge, he had written an article in which he referred to Roe v. Wade as the worst abomination in the history of constitutional law.
Levy points out Pryor's been blasted in the Senate before.
And some of the Democrats accused him basically of being too Catholic. And we took out ads that said Catholics need not apply.
Malcolm and Levy both have praise for federal Judge Dianne Sykes, and they warn she'll face opposition.
She's a solid conservative, very bright. I mean, both of those alone are enough to make Democrats come after her.
She has a long track record and has certainly written a number of opinions that please conservatives, and so I'm sure that the Democrats would come up with some way to attack her if she's the nominee.
Both judicial experts also pointed out 48-year-old Michigan Justice Joan Larson, who actually clerked for the now-deceased Justice Antonin Scalia.
She was highly admired by all the Scalia clerks.
Larson's also a state court judge, which, if you're looking for a little diversity on the court, would be nice, since none of the people who are there now came from state courts.
The fact that all of her Scalia clerks, who probably many of them are conservatives, think highly of her, says something about her judicial philosophy.
Then there's the young pro-Second Amendment federal judge Thomas Hardiman, who used to drive a taxi while in law school.
Interesting story. Grew up in a family of very, very modest means. I don't think that his parents went to college. He put himself certainly through law school and possibly through college as well, driving a taxi cab.
Democrats, like their new Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, have sworn stiff opposition to virtually any Trump nominee.
I don't care how qualified you are, just the fact that you're conservative, is reason enough to oppose you. Schumer is high on that list of Democrats who have said that.
I certainly think that he will try to obstruct any nomination.
But since when they were the majority, they used the so-called nuclear option to stop the GOP minority from blocking Obama nominees, Dems are likely to face that themselves now that they're the minority.
Well, the shoe is somewhat on the other foot.
At the end of the day, if they try to filibuster, that Republicans will use the nuclear option.
Democrats are sure to not like any of Trump's picks, and though they've lost much of their power, they're sure to put up a fight against them. Paul Strand, CBN News, reporting from the Supreme Court.
Thanks, Paul. Jay Sekulow of the American Center for Law and Justice is with us. Jay, any idea how soon Trump could choose a nominee for the court?
Hey, Pat. Yeah, I think probably in the next 2 weeks. I think we need to be gearing up for a confirmation battle for the Supreme Court nominee by the end of this month. And no matter who that nominee is, kind of echoing something Paul said, whoever that nominee is, there's going to be a fight. What you've seen in these confirmation battles so far, whether it's been even Rex Tillerson or Jeff Sessions or Betsy DeVos. This is kind of warm-up practice. They're all being confirmed. The nuclear option would have to be implemented for the Supreme Court nominee. It's already been implemented by the Democrats for the lower courts and for these cabinet positions. But for the Supreme Court, you'd have to get the majority of the Republicans, the Republican majority, to say, okay, if you're going to block every Supreme Court nominee that's qualified that President Trump puts forward, then yes, I think the nuclear option goes into play. But I expect a nominee very soon.
You think it'll be Pryor?
Well, he'd be great. I mean, there's no question that Bill Pryor is someone that's well qualified. He's got a great judicial temperament. He's got a long track record now of opinions out of the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals. Is someone that has a textualist view of the Constitution. So I think he's certainly the leading contender. Now, in Supreme Court nominees, as you know, Pat, as well as anybody, better than most, is that there'll probably be there's probably three names, and we know that. There's three names being discussed right now as probable nominees. It may well be one of those three rise to the occasion, and the president says yes. But Pryor would be excellent. Neil Gorsuch, who was not on your list from the 10th Circuit, I've appeared before him. He would be very good as well. And I think, look, it's a solid list. Everybody on that list is potentially to be a great Supreme Court nominee and also potentially to have a confirmation battle. So we just need to prepare for a real confirmation battle and use this process we're going right now with the various cabinet positions as just the practice sessions. That's really what it is.
Jay, you know, we have found a vendetta against religious belief in the schools and in the federal agencies. It's unbelievable. And everybody says, well, the constitutional separation of church and state, that isn't in the Constitution, is it?
It's not. And the Scalia approach to the Establishment Clause, as it's called, was the right approach. There had to be room in the joints, they said, for free exercise of religion, freedom of speech, and that simply acknowledging the religious heritage of our country does not constitute literally a constitutional crisis. I think there's 4 justices that generally share that view. There's 4 that don't. Sometimes one of the 4 that don't actually will join with us, Justice Breyer. He'll go back and forth on various cases. But this is, look, we have an 8-member Supreme Court right now. So on the issue of religious liberty, Pat, to be blunt, my view is win the cases in the Court of Appeals right now and try not to have them all running up to the Supreme Court of the United States. Let's see how the Supreme Court shakes out over the next couple of months. And then I think that's a better strategy to move forward when you've got a 9-justice Supreme Court. I've done cases, as you know, with 8 justices. One of those I did with 8 justices. I had to re-argue the case the next term. So I think, look, religious freedom in the United States, 1 justice can make a huge difference. There's no doubt about it.
The so-called Johnson Amendment, Trump astounded me when he started talking about the Johnson Amendment. Do you think they can get rid of that? It shouldn't be. It's essentially a few lines in the IRS tax code.
Well, it's a muzzle on churches that doesn't exist for any other groups, including labor unions that are tax exempt as well. Churches have this special disability placed on them, if you will. Pat, I'll tell you this. It's being drafted, the change on that's being drafted right now. And I met with our head of government affairs here in Washington yesterday. It's going through. We're going to get the Johnson Amendment repealed. It's going to pass the House. It's going to pass the Senate. And it's going to be signed by President Trump.
Jay, I fought for that, fought for it for years. I mean, I lobbied the speaker, I lobbied the various ones, and they weren't moving. But this time, everybody's with us.
Yeah, Pat, I know you've worked on this. Look, you and I have worked together for over 30 years. Yeah. This is something that's been, I know, at your heart for a long time. It's been at the center of what we do. We're going to see it, Pat. We could see it happen literally in 120 days. Well, I really think it's going to move that quick.
This is going to open up the doors so that preachers can speak out about public issues from the pulpit. I mean, this is going to...
Yeah, and from their heart. Right. Exactly.
One last thing. What about Jeff Sessions? Do you think there's any problem getting him through? I mean, he's Trump's attorney. I mean, I think that they've never voted down an attorney general.
No, I was with Senator Sessions the week before 2 weeks before the confirmation hearings, and I knew he was prepared. He did a phenomenal job in front of the Judiciary Committee. Jeff Sessions will be the next Attorney General of the United States, and he will be both an attorney and a general, and that agency, an agency I've worked with, but an agency that needs real leadership, and Jeff Sessions is the right man at the exact right time to move that agency forward.
Bill Clinton had all the U.S. attorneys resign. Do you think that they'll do that this time?
That is the customary practice that should be put in place. I know that President-elect Trump has told the ambassadors from the United States to all of the countries that at 12:01 they are relieved of their post.
All the ambassadors.
Yep.
Yeah, well, that's okay. Well, coming up, ladies and gentlemen, more as we continue the inauguration of the 45th President of the United States of America. It's a transformational election. Terry?
That's right. We're going to take a look at the expected transformation in United States-Israeli relations.
Night and day. I think it will be dramatic and it'll be immediate. There's no doubt in my mind. I think it's going to mark a dramatically improved relationship between Israel and the United States.
Our special Inauguration Day coverage continues after this.
Today is the inauguration of the 45th President of the United States, a man who won with a contentious election, but who is making bold strides as few elected officials in my lifetime have ever done. And I think Donald Trump is going to be a transformational president, more so than almost anybody since maybe Franklin Roosevelt. Well, today marks the beginning of what we expect to be the start of a much better relationship between the United States and an extremely important ally, the nation of Israel. President Obama often took a hard line against Benjamin Netanyahu, but as Chris Mitchell reports from Jerusalem, it looks like we're about to see a big change.
When Donald Trump stunned the world on Election Day, some knew it also signaled a transformation in the U.S.-Israeli relationship.
Night and day. I think it will be dramatic and it'll be immediate. There's no doubt in my mind.
Former Governor Mike Huckabee sees a big difference over the last 8 years.
I'm very optimistic about these next few years. I think it's going to mark a dramatically improved relationship between Israel and the United States.
The one thing that we can be very confident about with Donald J. Trump is he's a man of change.
Trump transition team member Becky Norton Dunlap believes Trump will take a new look at old Middle East problems.
I think that's one reason why people in Israel who have not liked the old way of doing things are hopeful and optimistic, because they at least see that in this new president, America is going to relook at some of these old problems.
Huckabee sees the failed two-state solution, the plan to give the Palestinians their own country side by side with Israel, as one old problem. Another one, the unwillingness to move the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem. He expects David Friedman, Trump's choice for ambassador to Israel, will be part of addressing those changes.
I think he believes we need to stop the BDS movement, which is very hurtful, not just to Israelis, it's hurtful to the Arab population of Israel as well. I think he will lead in helping get the embassy moved, and I hope he will help to forever put an end to what I consider an unworkable, irrational policy of the so-called two-state solution that frankly both Democrats and Republicans have put forward.
The signal is we're going to take a new look at things, and we're putting someone in there who's not the same old, same old.
With his decisions so far, it's fair to say that the Middle East hasn't seen anything quite like Donald Trump. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Well, I think it's time to move that embassy, and the King of Jordan says, oh, it'll be a terrible tragedy. No, it won't. We'll just say, look, this is our embassy, and this is the capital of Israel. It's time we acknowledge what Jerusalem is, the capital of Israel. It's not some occupied settlement. It is the capital city of a nation. But with us now from Washington is retired Lieutenant General Jerry Boykin. Jerry is a great warrior, head of Delta Force. He's one of the preeminent warriors of our history, and he's a former Deputy Undersecretary under George Bush, now Executive Vice President of the Family Research Program. General, it's a pleasure to have you back with us on the 700 Club. God bless you. How are you?
I'm well, and the last time I was on your program was election eve when we were able to celebrate together the victory of Donald Trump.
Well, it's taking shape. I mean, you know, as they say, elections have consequences. This one sure is. This is amazing. Let me ask you, you know, he's talking about rebuilding the number of ships in the Navy, rebuilding the Army, rebuilding the Air Force, and updating the equipment that they use. What is needed to be done? Is it as bad as we hear?
Oh, yes, it is, Pat. It's bad, and you know, I think the Navy has asked for 355 ships, and I think they're down at like 292 now. So there's a lot of shipbuilding that has to go on, and the Air Force is at the lowest number of airplanes since its creation in 1947. I think the biggest thing, though, is that Donald Trump has to appoint the right leadership. I think he's taken the first step with Jim Mattis. But he's got to appoint the right leadership that understands that the mission of our military is simply to win wars. And people who will focus on that have to go into these senior positions there.
Well, what do you think? I mean, he's got Madison, he's got Flint, and he's got some other generals around him. I mean, Mattis would be in charge of the Defense Department. You think he knows? Does he have the warrior mentality? I think they call him Mad Dog.
Yeah, of all the people he could have chosen, out of the current or retired general officer population, Jim Mattis is the guy that has the finest reputation for being a warrior. And that's what he is. They call him the warrior monk. He understands what the military's mission is, and I think that he will go about doing a very careful assessment of what the current condition of the military is, and then recommend to the president the changes that are necessary to restore readiness so that we can confront our enemies, we can be reliable for our allies, and we can win the wars if they come.
You know, Trump has beat up on some of these aerospace companies that they're overcharging, and some of these contracts are just obscene, and the aviation companies are backing up. They say, oh yeah, we can rejigger the numbers and get them down lower. What do you think? Are we spending too much on equipment?
That has been a systematic problem for probably 4 decades, in that, you know, we go into major productions on end items, and then we make modifications, we make changes, and of course these companies that are building these things, like airplanes and tanks and ships and so forth, then they charge us a lot more. I think that Trump has already taken a very good first step in his dealings with Boeing over Air Force One. You're going to see more of that, and I think we're going to get spending under control under a Trump administration.
Last question. What would you do about ISIS? Is ISIS really the main threat, or is it Russia or China? We've got a bunch of threats out there, including North Korea and their nukes. What do you think?
Well, here's what I think about ISIS. I think that Donald Trump is not going to isolate his strategy to just ISIS. I think he's going to look at this as a global problem. He's going to look at it as global jihad. Ultimately, the objective is to establish a global caliphate. And I think he's going to demand that Jim Mattis come up with a strategy that will cover the globe, not just the Middle East, not just Syria and Iraq, and not just going after ISIS. I think he's going to go after the global jihad movement, and there'll be a strategy that will be well thought out and executable to do that.
You know, General, the ISIS is just a little pipsqueak organization with a few thousand people, and yet they have twisted the tail of the United States of America. Can't we put some troops in there and some military assets and just wipe them out?
Could we?
Yeah.
No.
No.
I don't think we could. And the reason is because there's an ideology associated with this. I mean, you can kill all of the ones that are currently on the battlefield, but more are going to come up. What you have to do is you have to have a comprehensive plan that includes an information strategy, that includes the elements of national power that the United States can bring to bear on this. We've got to rally our allies. We've got to make them know that we're reliable allies, and that if they'll stand with us, share intelligence with us, fight with us, that we're going to be there when they need us, and I think that's all part of defeating them. But I think that just thinking that we can go out and kill them all on the battlefield is probably not going to be successful.
General Boykin, it's always a joy to have you. Thank you so much. God bless you, and happy inauguration.
God bless you, Pat.
All right.
Thank you.
Terry.
Well, coming up, a businessman falls on hard times.
The reality hit me that I could not afford one item in the dollar store. That was a very sobering moment for me.
See how this man went from flat broke to running 5 successful businesses when we come back.
It's the 45th inauguration of the 45th President of the United States. I just wanted to show you what it looks like up there in Washington, because we're there, the parade route. But he's not going to have one of those lengthy parades that went on for hours and hours and hours. He said, I want to get to work. So
that sounds like Donald Trump, doesn't it?
It'll be great. But anyhow, okay. Well, Leon Johnson and his wife LaTanya own 5 successful businesses. It's hard to believe that the Johnsons were once so broke they couldn't even afford to shop at the dollar store.
Playing golf is one of the ways Leon and LaTanya Johnson take a break from their busy schedule of running 5 successful companies.
My life is incredible right now because of God.
To get where they are today, Leon has learned some hard lessons. It was 1993 when he and a partner started a mobile car detailing operation after 14 and a half years in the Navy. Even though he worked hard and had a lot of customers, he wasn't making a profit.
When you go into business, everyone genuinely believes you're just going to be an instant success. You know, we didn't understand market research. So you quickly realize you have a lot of business, but you're not making a profit.
LaTanya's salary as a bank teller was their only income. They couldn't keep up with their bills and had to move out of their apartment. A friend rented out a room to them and their young daughter.
I just remember some nights just laying there and just crying myself to sleep. And that my husband didn't even know. But I would just silently just cry out to God and say, God, you've got to help us.
Leon started suffering from stress and anxiety.
My consistent prayer to God was, God, I love you. I need your help. God's answer to me was consistently, I love you. Follow my principles.
One of those principles was tithing, something the couple hadn't done consistently since starting the business. Leon decided to tithe faithfully on anything he made. He says afterwards the business started turning a profit. It did so well they were able to move into a house they had rented. But after a year, they had stopped going to church and tithing. Once again, the business started losing money.
I think the reason I went back to my old ways is sometimes we feel like, okay, thank you, God, I got it from here.
After a year, his business began failing. His income dropped so dramatically that he couldn't afford to shop at discount stores.
The reality hit me that I could not afford one item in the dollar store. That was a very sobering moment for me. From that point in that dollar store, I said, Lord, I get it. Lord, I will be faithful. Lord, I will be obedient.
Soon afterwards, he and LaTanya found a new church and started tithing and giving to CBN.
Things were starting to turn around. We actually had hope again.
With the detailing business doing so well, LaTanya quit her job at the bank and started a cleaning business of her own. Now the Johnsons own 5 successful businesses. The one that provides medical solutions has been ranked among Inc. magazine's top 5,000 fastest growing privately held companies in the U.S. for the past 3 years.
The financial blessing has been wonderful, but God has restored me to right thinking and humility. And as a man, I feel that I'm very well balanced.
In addition to their tithes, the couple are also CBN founders.
It's a great ministry, a great opportunity to give into something that's a lot bigger than us.
The couple has learned many lessons about running a business, but the most important one is giving obediently to God.
God is faithful, and He is a God that He will not lie. Just determine in your heart, in your mind, that I'm going to start. And God knows your heart. He knows where you are, and He will meet you right where you are.
God is faithful to everything and to every principle and to every promise that's written in the Word. Be obedient to God. Just trust Him.
Isn't that amazing? One of the top businesses in America couldn't buy $1.
5 successful businesses.
Can you imagine that?
Yes.
God bless them.
It's
Hey,
wonderful.
listen, for those who want to participate, you know, they said, okay, we're going to do something. So they're Founders Club members. God bless them. Well, the 700 Club is $20 a month. And, you know, what do you spend $20 on? I mean, you know, you get this business about getting one of those latte things at Starbucks, I mean, you blow $5-10 on one cup of coffee. All right. The Secret Kingdom, the law of what is it?
Expectation. That's Gordon's additional teaching. So it's all of your secret kingdom, plus the law of expectation is on there as well.
All right. This is the Secret Kingdom, the principles of success. People seem to like this a lot. So we give this to you, the Secret Kingdom. You know, God gave me a revelation on that. He really did. After 5 years of praying, I said, Lord, how does this world work? And this is how He opened it up to me and showed me, and I wrote down these principles that the Lord showed me. So it has touched a lot of lives. Okay. Anyhow, we give that from people who make the 700 Club. But, you know, 1,000 Club member.
A lot of people are increasing their giving right now, you know, going up to the next club level, and that's really a wonderful thing.
I hate to say the animal spirits of America have been loosed. Under Obama, it was if you were making money, we're going to penalize you. Yeah. We're going to tax you. We're going to make it hard. We're going to put regulations on you. We're not going to give you the freedom. We're going to bind you down like Gulliver and the Lilliputians. And all these little bureaucrats are all running around with their little strings, and they're tying down the people. And all of a sudden, the people, the shackles are off, and the enormous resources of America are being unleashed. And I think people feel that, and they're getting more generous. And it's very important because, I mean, we want to move out too and accomplish something more significant for the Lord.
Well, and that happens when we all link arms together. And so when you join the 700 Club, we want you to know that you are helping people all over the world as well as right here at home. People like these 2 little brothers from Vietnam. At the ages of just 4 and 1, they had to beg for food on the side of the road.
Loam was 4 years old and Vaughn was 1 when their parents abandoned them near their home in Vietnam.
We were so hungry. I carried my brother to my aunt's house to ask for food, but she didn't let us in.
The brothers sat next to the street, hoping that someone would see them and help them.
Vaughn was crying so hard because he was starving. I couldn't do anything to help him.
Another aunt found them and took them in, but over time she wasn't able to provide for them either.
There was a time when we didn't have food to eat for 2 days. My stomach hurt a lot.
Eventually, the brothers came to live here, at this Christian home supported by CBN's Orphans Promise.
The food here is so good, and we get to eat 3 times a day. On our first day here, they also gave us clothes and new towel.
In addition to food and shelter, the boys are also experiencing love. Today, Loam and Vaughn are healthy and active boys. They both do well in school and enjoy playing with their friends.
I want to thank the people who care for us and help us.
CBN.
Lives changed because of your generosity. I hope you can see that you really can make a difference around the world without ever leaving your living room. Pat just talked to you about joining the 700 Club. I want to add something to that. We want to send you the Secret Kingdom when you do that, but we'd also like to ask you to do it using Pledge Express, electronic monthly giving. It saves us some admin costs so that we can put even more of your gift into the lives of boys like you just saw in that story. Our way of saying thank you for using Pledge Express is to send you Power for Life teachings. You'll get one of these every month, and we think you'll really enjoy them. Well, a couple minutes left. You ready to answer some questions?
Go for it.
Okay, this is Carolina, who says, I'm ready to file for separation. My husband cheated on me and he does not want counseling. He also cheated a lot when we were just dating. I realize I made a huge mistake marrying him. Should I stay for my love and commitment to God, or should I go? He said they did not have sex. Is that adultery? I no longer trust him. We also have 2 sons.
Well, it's a tragedy. It's a tragedy being played out thousands of times in our country. The sexual revolution and the infidelity that's there, it's terrible. Listen, that is a grounds for divorce under what Jesus had to say. And what you've got is an intolerable situation. You have a philanderer as your husband, but there was a former president who was a philanderer, and his wife stayed with him. But I think in your case, you're probably better off to get a settlement where you get your money, you get looked after, and you get free, because this thing will weigh down on you. It'll tear you apart, and your ego, your psyche, your inner being will be damaged permanently. So I think get out of it.
Okay, this is Robert, who says, Pat, I was recently told by a homeless person that because I did not give him any money in response to his request, that I was going to hell. Am I going to hell if I do not give money to every homeless person that asks?
I think that homeless person is closer to hell than you are. I think he's a bum, and he's trying to play on your sympathy and extort money from you. The ruses they use. I've worked the streets in New York, and I know how it is. And what they'll do, they'll lie to you. They'll tell you all this stuff, and what they want. And, one of them, well, I want to go across to Staten Island. And, I need some money. And okay, look, I hear you want food. Let's go. I'll take you to the automat, and I'll buy you lunch. You're going to do what? Yeah. Okay. Well, we leave you with today's Power Minute from Psalm 112. Blessed is the man who fears the Lord, who delights greatly in his commandments. Wealth and riches will be in his house, and his righteousness endures forever. For Terry and all of us, this is Pat Robertson. See you Monday. Bye-bye.